Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Prathama, emceeing for the track Integrated Mobility. It gives me great pleasure to welcome one and all over here on behalf of GRIHA Council. So it is said that if cities are the engines of economic growth, transport are the driving wheels. Mobility and accessibility are the key solutions to the climate resilient and sustainable future. Sustainable urban mobility requires a mind shift where the private cars give away to public transport, electric vehicles, cleaner modes of transport, and even car sharing and so on. So this session aims to explore sustainable urban mobility as a solution to the current traffic management practices and to reduce GHG emissions. Now I invite our esteemed panelists on the dais. Ms. Leena Nandan, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Please join your hands together to welcome the panelists. Professor Vinayak Dixit, Head of Research Center for Integrated Transport Innovation, University of New South Wales. Dr. Simone Leao, Senior Lecturer in City Analytics, University of New South Wales. Mr. Sohinder Gill, CEO Global Business for Hero Electric and Director General, Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles. Dr. Indradip Mitra, Senior Technical Advisor, GIZ. Ms. Akshima Ghate, Principal, Rocky Mountains Institute. She is on her way and she'll be joining us in a while. And now take the opportunity to welcome the chair of the session, Mrs. Leena Nandan, Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor at Ministry of Road, Transport and Highways. In past, she was Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor of Ministry of Shipping, Joint Secretary at Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Joint Secretary of Tourism at India Tourism Development Corporation Limited. Besides this, she has served at various positions at Tourism Development Corporation Limited and Shipping Corporation of India Limited, to name a few. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here with us, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome Professor Vinayak Dixit, Director of Research Center for Integrated Transport Innovation, Director for Travel Choice Simulation Laboratory at School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at UNSW, Australia, to deliver the thematic address. His research focuses on studying risk in transportation infrastructure system to infer individual preferences under risk and uncertainty. We are honored to have you here with us, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you for the kind invitation, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be here and speak on this topic. I'll just try to. I think this should be perfect. So what I'm going to do is speak about integrated smart mobility systems, and in a way try to give a journey into why we have brought it up again. Like, why is it possible to think about integrated mobility systems now than ever before, and as a tool to actually solve some of the sustainability issues and address congestion. So if you think about the history behind mobility systems, it actually started probably in the late 90s around intelligent transport systems. And intelligent transport systems, the idea was around developing new sensors and sensor systems and that could measure transport systems and transport performance. And the transformation or the evolution from intelligence to smart comes about when you can start thinking of reacting and acting proactively to control our traffic systems to achieve efficiency, reduce wastage, improve safety. And what are the three key drivers that has come about, which is pushing this theme through, is basically ubiquitous connectivity, data, and reliable models that the data uses. Now, with the idea of ubiquitous connectivity, it's not only the connectivity from a communication standpoint, but it's also the infrastructure connectivity from a transport network, connectivity in your energy systems. So the fact that you can actually create and get efficiencies from centralization of your energy systems. And that's one of the main drivers for electric vehicles. The fact that you don't have disparate energy sources which are driving our transport system and creates inefficiencies. So from the big data analytics in transport, so the ubiquitous data, what ubiquitous data has done is it has allowed us to understand people's travel patterns. So this is actually, one of the things you can actually do is if you have an Android phone or a Google phone, you can pull 4 years worth of your location history data. So that's my location history data from the last 4 years. And you can then figure out where people travel and how they travel. So this is my travel patterns and get their origin destination patterns. What that allows us to do is now do user-centered infrastructure, transport and traffic infrastructure, and create mobility patterns around that. And so that is from a planning side. And the other source of what data is doing is allowing us to do real-time traffic management. So this is actually from the city of Shenzhen in China, where we've been getting real-time traffic, actually real-time taxi data. And from the taxi data, you can infer bottlenecks. You can infer time of day bottlenecks and change signal timings and manage traffic proactively in those cities. And data is one aspect of it. What you really also need are the models to support it. What I mean by the models is how does traffic move so that you can actually infer from the data what you're looking for. You need reliable models to understand what the data is saying. So what we have been doing is developing transport network models, which are large scale, so at a regional level, so that you can actually infer how bottlenecks migrate. So if you develop a solution, you make changes to one part of your network, the bottlenecks actually migrate to another part of the network. So trying to understand those interdependencies and manage that is something which is extremely important to think about it from an integrated standpoint. So you need models, you need data to do integrated modeling. And these models, so how are these models being used? It's just to kind of think. So if you think about it, connectivity, data, and models are tools, but how are they being used to actually change and influence our transport system? So this is something called the work zone impact and strategy estimation tool. So what it does is if you think about any transportation network, there's always some kind of construction work or renewal happening on those networks at any point of time. And what you can do is you can optimize your transport network to schedule and locate your construction zones such that you minimize the impact on your traveling system. So you can reduce congestion, reduce fuel costs, as well as reduce emissions by just intelligently managing your work zones and construction. It also then goes into natural disasters and resiliency plans. One fundamental thing what is happening right now is if you think about the future risk to transport networks, it's climate change and disasters that are affecting it. And being able to understand the vulnerabilities of these links so that you can plan for reliable transport systems to actually serve the needs of the individuals during cases of disasters as well as vulnerability. This is something actually, one of the projects which has borne out of our collaboration with the government of India as well as with the city of Thane, where we have developed an adaptive traffic signal controller. And the idea is that we are using crowdsourced traffic data. We use real-time crowdsourced traffic data to optimize our traffic signals in an efficient way and improve safety. Now, the beauty of this system is that we don't use fixed infrastructures as sensors. So you don't have the loop detectors. Now, what happens with loop detectors, which are basically embedded sensors in your road, is that anytime there's construction work, it gets digged out, and your adaptive transport system kind of is not working anymore. So this is resilient to those kind of issues. It reduces cost, so it's actually this system is 1/10 the cost of current adaptive traffic signal systems. And we have shown that it improves, these are the intersections in Thane, anywhere from 30 to 35% improvement in queues and delays. The other thing you can actually do is if you have emission sensors at that point, so we have been doing this as well, if you have emission sensors in these areas, you can actually start looking at eco traffic signal optimization. So you can, in real time, based on what your carbon dioxide levels are, you can actually optimize. And the objective functions end up giving you different phasing structures and signal timings. We have used data and these models to come up with efficient logistics operations for food rescue and delivery operations. So there's actually an NGO in Australia, it works across Australia, called Oz Harvest. And with Oz Harvest, what we've been doing is getting their data and using reliable transport models and logistics models to see how we can optimize food wastes, or when I say it's not actually food waste, but food that would have been disposed of, pick that up and then give it off to shelters. So you're doing two things. It's actually providing it's contributing to the circular economy. The fact that this food would have gone waste, we're actually using it to feed people, and do it in a very cost-effective manner. We are able to do real-time crash prediction, so we can predict crashes 5 minutes before they happen, based on traffic data which is coming in real time. We can infer the likelihood of crashes before they happen to then come up with strategies. So the strategies could be changing speed limits in real time, so variable speed limit systems, optimizing your traffic signals in these pieces. And the last piece is shared mobility systems. So one of the things about shared mobility systems is the connectivity, and the data is providing individuals to actually access transport assets in a very optimized way, as well as in an efficient way. But it also creates its own problems. So one of the things is a lot of the MaaS services, mobility as a service providers, is actually is run by private players, which could create agglomeration effects and also lead to mobility, the concept of mobility poor. So we need to kind of understand that from our modeling standpoint and work towards that. So that's, thank you.
Thank you, Vinayak, for that thought-provoking and brief overview of whatever we are talking about in terms of integrated mobility. I think I would like, before I ask the other panelists for their specific interventions, I would like to say that this is a very good initiative that Terry has taken, and to bring together organizations, to bring together stakeholders, because all of us are talking about sustainability, but unless we are able to put our thoughts and our plans together and synergize our activities, perhaps we'll all be working in silos, as is so frequently seen in government systems as well as outside government. I mean, let us not be too harsh on ourselves. So it is very interesting that we have this new set of ideas coming up, and I'm sure there would be some good outcomes resulting from the exchange of ideas through this session as well as others which are happening even as we speak. I would like to get the thoughts of Simone on particularly the one issue that was flagged by Vinayak on shared mobility. And perhaps you could make an intervention and kind of share your own ideas of how you think this has been done successfully in different parts of the world, and put it in the Indian context.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the second panelist for today, Dr. Simone Leao. She is Senior Lecturer in City Analytics, University of New South Wales. She works on developing knowledge and methodologies to assist urban planning to generate or regenerate urban areas. Her research explores forms of using data and applying analytics in the domain of smart cities to promote sustainable and equitable development. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to echo Vinayak in some of his statements on the role of data and models to assist us to better understand mobility in cities and using that knowledge to plan cities. But I'm going to focus in one part of the research that we've been developing, that it's looking at mobility through the lenses of active transportation and public transportation more specifically. And so the role of city analytics, and to put a bit in context, we are the city analytics group in UNSW, part of the Faculty of Built Environment. It's within the City Futures Research Center. And it's a collection of people looking at the city from different aspects in an integrated way, from city housing, city shaping, city well-being, city analytics, and at the same time with some cross topics in terms of equity, productivity, renewal, governance, and all around that, the notion of sustainability. The city analytics group is formed by three main pillars. We have our city analytics research program. We do have a city analytics lab in which we develop, test, and apply a number of new technologies to assist planning and collaborative planning and policy making. And more recently, a new master's in city analytics with the intention to bring these new skills and new challenge of big data, new technologies to the next generation of urban planners, built environmental professionals. As I mentioned before, I'm going to focus today in the city movement indicators, and I would like to start showing you quite a powerful image. Let me put from start here. This is Sydney. We do have this data actually for the whole Australia, all the capital cities. It doesn't show much now. Now you can see movement around the city. This is cycling. This is showing over a loop of 24 hours in Sydney, how people cycle. When it gets so dark, it's early in the morning, late in the night, but then you feel the pulses. This data is not real time here in this visualization, but it can be. It's from an app, a mobile phone app, which collect data from people who voluntarily engage into the initiative, and mostly, individually, people want to track their mobility. They try to understand, sometimes they set targets, they want to get healthier, they want to they put targets to increase that physical activity. But the whole thing from this individual, for many individual reasons for joining this app, when we put it together, we actually started to have a better understanding of how people move around. And what we are trying to do, for example, with this data, is to bring that data to planning and decision making. And one thing is, it's great, the visualization, but there's a number of challenges that we've never had data at that level of detail in space and time before, particularly with active transportation, to see how people walk, how people cycle in that level of detail. Planning, more conventionally, sometimes distrust that data. Think, well, it's self-recruited. Some people decide to engage in that. Some people don't do it. How do we know that that group represent the population? How can we make decisions on that? And then part of our work is not simply collect and clean the data, but validate the data. Try to bring a level of quality that really we can make use for insightful planning, understanding of behavior, and then better infrastructure, for example, and increase our level of active transportation in the city. And then we started using a number of methods to better understand that too. One thing is the data, other thing, as Vinayak mentioned before, is the models. Then we started to create those dashboards in which we can start looking, well, what is the difference between trips which are for recreation or for transport? How is the difference between females and males? We discover, for example, and it's confirmed in literature in other countries, females are a lot more concerned about safety than men in cycling. And normally, the proportion of women, if it's high in a place, it represents normally a proxy for good infrastructure, good urban design for cycling. And then we started to use all the methods from advanced spatial statistics, machine learning, here, agent-based modeling, different methodologies appropriate for big data, for complex and large varied data, to try to not simply understand patterns, but to create scenarios, to start to see, okay, if this is the learning that we have, that people behave this way, what if we improve infrastructure, if we use different types of infrastructure, can we increase adoption? Can we increase the number of people with healthier active mobility? And we extended that research on big data also for transport. In Sydney, we do have the uphold card system. It's a smart card in which every time that someone uses the public transport, it records the location, the time. And with that, we can have a better understanding as well on how people move with public transport. And one of our interests in terms of integrated systems is actually to relate public transport and active transport as well. Just concerned about my time. Going for some of the concluding thoughts. One important thing is on this research, and in 10 minutes I'll give you a very brief overview of some things, and I hope that we can discuss them better, is that there is a very, very, very strong opportunity with these data sets to actually improve our mobility planning and management. But it comes with challenges as well. We've been testing and developing new methodologies. And there is a need. It's not only about the data and the models. One thing that we are developing in our research, because we found the need for that in terms of how we actually translate these knowledges and get these models applied by people who actually ultimately are going to take decisions. We've been co-designing models with end users, trying to understand what are the main challenges, what are the main questions, and the design of the tools in a way that actually resemble in some way the procedures they are taking. And this has been highlighting as well the theme of this event. There is the partnership. We've been doing that with partners from the academia, from government, and from industry. If you think about active mobility, it's not simply let's get more people walking and cycling. We are talking about cities which are a lot more complex, a lot denser. They are getting hotter. How do we do walking in, for example, in places where there are problems with heat waves? How do we handle that with the aging population? There are a number of challenges that if we want to increase and improve active transportation and mobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone, for highlighting the need for data gathering and data analysis. I think that is something which resonates with the earlier presentation as well. And it is also important to keep in mind, as you very rightly pointed out, that we have to do a segmentation of the kind of infrastructure we need. Whether it is for women, it is different. If it is an age-based infrastructure, that has to be different. So I think the planning and implementation has to take into account the user's perspective. We also have with us Mr. Sohinder Gill, who wears two hats. He's with the Hero company, and he's also with the Electric Vehicle Manufacturers Association. And therefore, I think it's very important to get a perspective when we talk about sustainability, especially in mobility. I think we need to get a perspective on electric vehicles, because it is the flavor of the season, it is the fashion of the day. But what are the issues? What is the way forward? I think we would all benefit greatly by hearing from you. Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Gill started his career with L&T in the aerospace division in the satellite launching program of ISRO. He later worked in all leading automotive organizations like Hero Honda, Escort, Yamaha, Kinetic Honda, and so on. He started SMEV in 2008 and enrolled 20 EV players to create collective vision for electric mobility in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. We saw excellent examples of technology taking care of sustainability in transportation. I would add a leg of mindsets to it. When I was traveling from my home to office to home 5 years back, I was very frustrated till I found a Google map, and then I could lead into lanes and small streets and beat the traffic. I was the happiest person, and now I see everybody is using that, and the lanes are more clogged than the roads. So I believe sometimes technology has a flip and flop side also. For me particularly, like it has sort of sent me into bigger car, because I believe that I can have gizmos which are fully connected, smart connected, so I can enjoy it, and I can still use technology to beat the traffic. So that's where perhaps India is in, particularly, where the solution has to be driven equally, if not more, on the mindset side. I personally believe that we are a society which is not too akin to early adoption of ideas. But as soon as we cross that chasm, there is an exponential growth. But many of the adoptions of such natures, they fall into the pit of that chasm in between the early adopters and early majority. And that's where the mindset counts. Personally, my experience of last 10 years trying to sell electric vehicles in India is this. We claim to be the largest market share holders of electric vehicles in India. We sell around 70% of total electric vehicles, buses, cars, two-wheelers put together. But the numbers are almost a shame. And the main reason for this is the mindset here. My customer who is wanting to buy an electric scooter from me is asking me a product which can equally perform as much as a motorcycle can. So he's comparing an electric vehicle straight away with the performance of a 125 cc's product, and which by no means an Indian customer can even afford if I can give it to him. So there lies the change, that whether you really need as a customer a 80 kilometers per hour product, zipping past, or you need something which you want to go from office to home, home to office, because there is a plus side of that attached to ecology and to a certain extent economy also. So that's where perhaps we are all stuck here, that how do we change the mindset of people? Is it technology driven? Yes, technology can also change the mindset, like Metro. It has changed the mindset of people of driving, changing over, but perhaps not entirely. Something else has to happen in between. And what is that something else that has to happen is it driven from the top by policy makers? Or is it an amalgamation of policy makers, industry bodies, corporates, and individuals? Whatever experience I have is that obviously some triggers have to happen from somewhere for it to start from somewhere. It won't happen on its own. An individual would never be in the forefront to change a mindset. He would say, why should I do it? I have seen people during this Diwali wearing masks and burning crackers. So they would not change. And society or a community is a collection of individuals, so they also won't change so soon. But yes, policymakers and institutions like this, TERI, CI, PhD, SMEV, SIAMs, perhaps have more role to play in trying to create a trigger somewhere that here is a technology solution and here is a mindset issue. Let's try to marry them together and change it. Another thing I believe in Indian scene protects is perhaps because we are quite reactive, not proactive. We always wait for the problems to blow up, even if it's our personal issues of illness or it's a societal issues. Delhi is an example where we are driven against the wall, where perhaps mindsets will automatically change because there is no other alternate to it. So that's another way of solving the problems. But yes, leaving this for the further discussion, I would say, let's merit these two pillars and say whether how to wed technology and mindset changes together to find a solution where we don't go into a spiral of more and more vehicles on the road, where we don't try and solve problems of mobility in some other way of transporting ourselves from point A to point B, rather than through only technology. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting the key issues that it's not just electric vehicles, it's, I think, across sectors, wherever we want to bring in change, there is a mindset that has to change. So therefore, the adoption of something new will only happen when the mind itself is sufficiently geared to accept something new. And I think that way we have to all work together. It is society, it is individual, it is government, it is the industry. And maybe it is through exchange of ideas like this forum, and I believe we would be having, I'm sure, a reasonably good interaction with the industry on electric vehicles, because the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has been trying to proactively push and take some forward-looking steps. But these are just, I would say, at the moment, drops in the ocean, because unless and until we see some significant progress on the ground in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, we really cannot sit back and say that we've done the needful. We have many more extra miles to go. I would like Akshima, who's with the Rocky Mountain Institute, and till recently I believe was with Terry, and that's how I interacted with her earlier. So I would like Akshima to then talk about not just what the Rocky Mountain Institute is doing, but particularly focus on something that you worked with the ministry on, which was carbon footprint in national highway development. Because today we are looking at not only reducing the carbon footprint in the construction and operation of national highways, but over a period developing climate resilient infrastructure. So if that is something which you could dwell on, we would be very grateful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, it's an honor to share the dais with you. And thank you, sir and Terry, for inviting. It's really great to be back after a gap of 4 months. So, so as ma'am introduced, I've been in Terry till recently and now working with RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute. We've been primarily working on mobility. But I'll just come straight to the subject of discussion, which is around integrated and sustainable mobility. And to pick, in fact, the point, ma'am, that you just said on carbon footprint, I think I was, in fact, just at a discussion which was focusing on electric vehicles and how to really give a push to electric vehicles. And there are supporters and there are critics of electric mobility, but I would say that let's look at it as an opportunity in the whole debate about carbon and energy. It's really an opportunity because we've seen the slow pace of adoption of the right things in urban transport sector. And what electric mobility now is doing is that it is giving us an opportunity to correct a lot of wrongs, particularly in public transport. I'm saying that till now we didn't have buses, but now we're talking about electric buses. So let's not criticize that, in the cost of an electric bus, I could have bought like 4 diesel buses or 3 diesel buses. I'll say, this is an opportunity to have more buses in cities. So I just wanted to start with that. And I think what when I was part of Terry, we did this study for the ministry on, I would say, a very important study on carbon footprint assessment of the whole national highway sector, essentially the road transport sector, to understand really the carbon impact. And of course, what you see is a significant footprint of whether it's the construction of highways, whether it's operation on highways, in terms of carbon emissions, and then you make projections and you see that this is going to increase. So that definitely is something which is, I would say, data-driven research that provides a pool of, evidence to policymakers to take action. Similar work, was done and has been done by several institutes, including RMI, WRI, ITDP, even in the context of urban areas. And similar results. You're seeing a very, very fast growth in transport emissions. And that's really the takeaway. I would kind of, not give numbers and say that the takeaway is that there is going to be a significant increase in energy consumption, and there is kind of a consensus around it. And what we need essentially, therefore, is solutions which are targeting, quick adoption of technological solutions which are growing very fast around the world. And I would say somehow, I mean, I agree so much with Mr. Gill. I've been interacting with him for so many years now. We've been kind of lagging behind. And it's not just the mindset of a consumer, it's like a mindset everywhere. So there is a need for more, I would say, injection of enthusiasm, a need to ability to take risks with new technologies and build a capacity to adopt something. It's fine, we may fail here and there. And then, to just give example, when we're talking about electrification, we've talked a lot of numbers, and I think there are some quick pilots we can do, and government policymakers have the kind of know-how to, and I would say the power to do that. One of the examples could be simple, fast, first and last mile urban freight. We have this huge e-commerce sector, now thriving and coming up, and two-wheelers being used, three-wheelers or vans being used with the likes of the Swiggies, Zomatos, and the big baskets. There can be, I mean, we have the regulatory power to inject some kind of a mandate to say that, okay, by 2020, 10% of the vehicle kilometers that you do have to be electric. Because then you're kind of, while they're providing a service to the society, they're also burdening us with congestion and pollution. So how do we recover that cost from them? So I think there is a lot of power using data. I mean, amazing amount of data that we are generating. We've been doing a lot of work as RMI with Niti Aayog on how to use the power or harness the power of data to really understand what's happening in our cities, what's happening on our highways, and then come out with solutions which help us leapfrog and not get into the usual thing, oh, I will survey, I'll find out what is the problem. Today, data is enabling us to do that quick planning, what Simone also presented. So I think today we need to, the message that I have essentially is we need to take, adopt new technologies. Of course, right now, the debate is also which technology, but I would say that we need to pilot and arrive at conclusions to say what technology is good or bad. Two, we need to use power of data. And third, most importantly, which we've been advocating along, is that we need to push shared forms of mobility. And in the whole context of, again, carbon and emissions, if we kind of see a model of mobility which is totally reliant on private vehicles, we are not going to go anywhere. And what we land probably is from a polluted congestion to a clean congestion. So we don't also want a scenario where we kind of going there. So I think there has to be a lot of push to shared mobility. Again, I think there is a lot of power in the hands of regulators to push that. We've been recently supporting Delhi government to come out with the draft electric vehicle policy. The policy is already out, and in fact, the consultation, inviting feedback from stakeholders is in the next week. And what it does is that it is actually adopting a carrot and stick approach. I would say more of carrot approach, where to push electric, shared mobility. It is kind of, giving incentives like cashbacks, per trip incentives to commuters, to aggregators, to say that, okay, I will transition to electric, VKT or passenger kilometers, whatever it is. So I think where we have a lot to do, as far as pushing shared electric connected, mobility world is concerned. And I mean, in the context of GRIHA, I think I would link it to, the fact that, GRIHA has been focusing on buildings, townships, large scale cities. I think these are the kind of instruments we have in our hand in terms of pushing some of these solutions, whether it is, mandating charging infrastructure in new developments, whether it is, asking or pushing new developments to have the right infrastructure for pedestrians and for the cyclist, cycle parking, even, some kind of shared mobility solution to get, we live in cities like Gurgaon and Noida, and we have no way to reach metro stations. So one of the biggest problem, when we talked about mindset change, I'm a public transport user, literally a complete public transport user. I think I just take out my car once in 2 weeks, and this wasn't the case, like I would say a year back. And the mindset change came actually by first the fact that there is availability of the product, of the right service. So I have a metro station where I can actually go, buy a cycle rickshaw and not needing to, interface with the traffic. So I think, shared mobility solution in large township that can really help people go from, their developments or residences or offices to metro stations. There is a lot of movement happening already. We ran this challenge with the Niti Aayog, the Lighthouse City Challenge, where Pune got selected to run an urban mobility lab. And idea was to experiment all these solutions. We were working on 12 solutions. Focus was largely energy, carbon, air pollution. How do you bring these down? So you realize you then, start breaking it up into so many small pieces of mobility, whether it is, promoting non-motorized transport infrastructure in the city, whether it's around parking solutions, around data solutions. Today, a lot of times the behavioral change is just happening by the fact that I can just have a convenient public transport route or journey planned through my smartphone. So I think there is so much of power technology, not in terms of vehicular technology, data, smartphones, is that enabling that the whole concept of mobility actually is now changing. It's not so much or everything about infrastructure. It is actually about mobility. How do I provide mobility as a service to the consumer? So I would say I would add to mindset that, mindset has to change for everybody and in the whole ecosystem. And I think tools like GRIHA can really push, and I know because I know GRIHA, that they can really push some of these mindset changes by creating the right environment within new developments, within the existing developments, to push that mindset change. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshima. And I think one of the very important ideas that you've thrown up is whether we are looking at the right incentives or disincentives for e-commerce, for instance. Because if we can, although this is also to be taken with a pinch of salt, whether regulatory power of government should be utilized to this end of saying that you will either, mandate that the minimum number of vehicles should be electric vehicles, whether that serves a purpose, or it is better to let us grow to that level of maturity by incentivizing service providers to use more and more of electric vehicles. So that is something which we do have to take with adequate caution, but it is an interesting line of thought. The other thing which you spoke about, and I think I would like our presenter Indradip from GIZ to dwell on this, is on the need for better integration for freight purposes also. Because when we talk about integrated movement, somehow we all tend to think about passenger movement, and which is like urban area movement, and how we can have more and more of seamless connectivity, less personal vehicles on the ground, more of public transportation. But I think the other aspect of mobility is also the freight and better integration so that there is more efficient movement of the freight on the right mode of transport. And Germany, and I'm sure from GIZ perspective, Indradip would be able to shed some light on it. Germany has also had some very good, interventions and initiatives on multimodal integration. So we would certainly like to hear from you on that. And that is an area which the government is also focusing on in a big way. So perhaps this is the right time when good ideas and good suggestions could be internalized and taken up for some fruitful development going forward. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this opportunity to speak here. My focus would be a little bit on the German side, because I am presenting GIZ, which is a German International Cooperation. It's an implementing agency of Government of Germany. So what is going on in Germany, I'll highlight a little bit, and also we have some interventions in India. I'll also speak about that. The first couple of slides, I'll speak about German system at the moment. It's a lot of discussions and research work is being carried out in this moment in Germany on the efficiency of the transportation, decarbonization, linking with the climate change goals, etc. The target is by 2050, it will be decarbonized. And a lot of options are being explored. So at the moment, the mood of the town there is that this is comprising of two elements. One is the mobility transition, that means modal shift, also demand side management of transport fleet, also shared connected mobility. On the other side, this is the energy transition in the transport sector, changing to different sets of fuels as an energy input for transportation. So it's estimated for German case that the reductions by over 60% can only be achieved by electric means. And this is, that is the precursor to the EV adoption. And the basic features which is actually developed in German case in this slide is same in India. The basic features are same, the challenges in the urban level and chances for mobility, the basic parameters are more or less similar. So there are so many, including urban freight, but also long distance one is there. A new project is being carried out. It's a 40-kilometer stretch from Mannheim to Darmstadt. It's by a new technology, which is electric technology, but light truck run on electric rails. And there are the new train started 3 months back. The whole train is running on biodiesel. And also there are 2 projects I can remember. This is using power to gas. That means electricity is used for hydrolysis, and that is used for moving a ship. This is a new project by Ministry of Transport in Germany, but also there is a new train running on hydrogen as well in the northwest part of Germany. So also a lot of studies and research going on about the modes of energy input, and it's estimated that the least amount of energy per 100 kilometers is actually direct battery electric. And this is in the context of urban. It's not long distance, it's a urban context. You have seen in this slide that there are fuel cell buses running in Germany. And the combustion engine, with the help of power to gas is there also, but power to liquid is also there, which is having more energy intensity. So therefore, I would like to highlight a little bit on that Vision 2020 in Germany. There are a lot of things going on in the electromobility. There is a National Electromobility Development Plan, but there's NPE, or the famous National Platform for Electromobility, which was formed in 2010, and onwards it's quite successfully running. Then there is also Electromobility Act, and many regulations came recently in that. So they have divided into 3 phases. First is market preparation, then the market ramp up, and the high volume market. And you can see, by the way, Germany has something like very approximately 50,000 electric cars and congestion, etc. So 2 levels of complexity at one time. So a lot of focus in that on the load management, demand side management, demand response. They are talking about, actually Germany has started piloting on the ancillary services in the electricity sector. So the fleet of cars are used as the ancillary service provider, like a coal power plant is for India. So the electrical system, they are dispatching the charging energy as the overall electricity dispatch component. It's a classical electricity side and not at all transport side originally, but now it is going very close together, integrated. So that is the point where the GIZ India is looking forward for the not immediate future, but a couple of years from now. Thank you.
I think if I picked up the right figures, you mentioned some 9,000 points for charging infrastructure and 50,000 vehicles in the country. So I think that is really significant, particularly looking at the size of the country vis-a-vis India. So really there is a long way to go as far as we are concerned, and that connects us back with what Sohinder mentioned in terms of changing the mindset and how we can come forward to change the mindset, which is going to be, it should not be a chicken and the egg kind of a syndrome where we don't know who is to take the first step forward. But all of us collectively, perhaps we can come to some kind of an action plan, some kind of key points that would trigger the change. And that is, I think, the net takeaway from the discussion. And I would like to thank the panelists before I request the members of the audience to kind of raise any suggestions and any points that they have, or seek any clarifications from any of the panel members before we wrap it up. Thank you.
Chris Pettit, UNSW. Thank you everyone for your presentations. I'm just wondering if there's anyone on the panel, particularly from India, who'd like to comment on, I guess there's a lot of technology out there. We've seen some very good modelling work, analytical work being done across a number of organisations in Australia and India. But to me, the elephant in the room is when I come and visit mega cities like Delhi, or it could be Seoul in Korea, and the list goes on, the traffic conditions outside just are increasingly getting worse. And you know, our Dean, Professor Helen Lockhead, was talking about urbanisation, and we know we've got more and more people coming to join us in our cities, and our air quality is not great. So how do we start to, you know, and you talked a bit about it before, the cultural shift, and the last presenter had some really nice slides, you know, showing the technology, you know, some nice bikes sitting down the side of the road. But the reality is, you know, those bikes, you know, the roads are not like that. They're congested, the footpaths are busy. So how do we make space for change to actually deal with some of these issues, making our cities more livable from a transport perspective?
You specifically spoke about congestion in the cities, and of course it is the greatest cause of concern, because it's not just the irritation and frustration that we face as commuters, but it's also a question of the pollution that is being, you know, caused, and which is a larger concern from the health perspective to all of us living in different cities, not just Delhi, but other cities of the country. I think there have been some steps taken in this direction in the past, but it's more in the nature of an experimentation. We've not really been able to crack the issue. There was a move made a couple of years ago by the government of Delhi in terms of coming out with a certain formula for, you know, which would determine which vehicles can be on the street on any given day, the odd-even formula as it was called. But I don't think it had that kind of an impact on the pollution levels. There was also this understanding that perhaps there was a lot of crop burning that was leading to the pollution in the air, but then that is not borne out by the fact that as we are in the almost second week of December, crop burning is confined to a certain time of the year, so it cannot be the cause of the pollution as on date. Therefore, the question of what are the core issues leading to pollution are something that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, I would not have the answers to them as of now, but the fact remains that there are multiple steps that we need to take to reduce the congestion on the roads. Public transportation and reduction of private vehicles on the roads to enable people to move into the cities comfortably is what we really need to arrive at, but that is easier said than done. So the ministry has been trying to work with the state governments, because the public transport is an area under the state governments. We've been trying to work with the states to have more robust public transport policies, looking at last mile connectivity, looking at proper urban transport planning, which is also connected with traffic management. But it is work in progress. So it's not as though any of us sitting here, I of course represent government, and the other panelists would have their own areas of experience, but I don't think any of us would be able to say that this is the way forward. But we're all trying to get there.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that point, ma'am? So I think one of the key, and you know this, Chris, as well, there's a nexus between land use and transport. You put in road, people will come. And that's where the transport planning models from an urban as well as suburban, more regional aspect are required to be able to evaluate the impact, the land use impact on transport and the transport impact on land use. And in fact, some of the cities in Mumbai, which I'm aware of because we work very closely with them, have been conducting traffic impact assessments prior to development. So any new development or changes in development are required to go through that process. Some of those kind of policies actually really help in able to understand that nexus and then and be able to evaluate and then mitigate some of those problems. Thank you.
May I say something? Yeah, sure.
I have a quick question to people representing UNSW in particular. We talked about a lot of big data and big data collection, and a threat which comes with big data is translation of it, especially when you're talking about user behavior. And how do you translate, how do you validate it? Like the term you used was inject quality into that data. because you can't, like, it might have flaws in terms of it because you can't really read behavior in terms of numbers and figures and surveys. So how do you work your methodology around it so that, planning steps can be more foolproof? And I think, and I have another question to Ms. Leena, Nandan, and both Mr. Sohinder, Gill, is like a lot of developed countries, a big part of adoption is incentivizing private car ownership as well, right? So in terms of India, where do you think we stand? How close or further away are we from that scenario where we can actually incentivize private cars and increase adoption in like huge numbers like we have seen around the world?
Yes, certainly. Big data brings a number of opportunities, but it comes with challenges. And one is the quality of data itself. Of course, it depends a lot on the source of data. The 3 V's that normally it's used to define big data, it's volume, variety, and velocity. Variety is one of that. The sources are quite different. If you consider, for example, our smart card data for the public transport, it's a very reliable data set. It's an official system. Sorry, it's feedback. Oh. It's an official system in which actually the whole population using the transport system in a day is recorded. And some mistakes might happen. One machine is not operating, but over the whole system, it's very small. Now, every day in Sydney, we have more than 5 million records. On the other side, if you get the cycling data, it's an app in which people voluntarily decide. And you think that there are hundreds of apps for people cycling. Some people use one app, some people use another app, some people use no apps at all when they're cycling around, some people might use more than one for different reasons. And then in that case, depend on the source, there is a need for cleaning and validating data. For example, that cycling data, the validation was using a census data, but the census data give us information only in journey to work, commuting. Any cycling data that it's not for functional or for commuting use, we have no data for validation. But it's true, for recreation, this is the best data we ever had. And we make some use, but with caution, because we know that might not be actually representative of the whole population.
I echo that, and actually I want to add to that. In the age of big data, theory, fundamental theory has become more important. People say that data are models. I believe that models, theoretical models, are required to actually evaluate data, to understand what we are looking for, because theory helps us give us the direction on what we are looking for in the data. For example, when we talk about mobility as a service, what is that service? What should we be looking for in that data around service? Then the first thing comes, how do we evaluate that quality of service? Then from that, if you go back to the foundations of microeconomic theory around preferences, one of them is, of course, getting from point A to point B, but then there's reliability. How do I get there reliably, and the risk associated to getting there on time? And then you can actually delve into the data and look at reliability. So in the age of big data, going back to the foundations of theory and models is become even more important to understand what we are looking for in the data.
The electric vehicle part of your question, I would like Mr. Gill to attempt an answer.
Yeah. Akshima said this, and Indradip showed that. Carrot and stick, and the flip-flop of the policy by the flags that you saw in 2016, 15 and all. That's the state of affairs. I believe that, yes, we have a carrot and stick in place, but the carrot has to be much bigger and the stick has to be much bolder. And the flip-flop has to stop. I also believe we don't have all the solutions in electric mobility, and nobody would have in any country for that matter, but we surely have solutions of some of our problems and vagaries. But I think we are too democratic for any solutions to come forth. As soon as we come out with some formulas which are very clear in the minds of bureaucrats, there are pulls and pressures which just mow them down. So this is the time now to distinguish and disintegrate the things into two parts, like this has to be done, this can be done, this is for India is surely known, fine. And then this disproportionate incentives and disproportionate, pushing the people has to set in. One cannot work forward towards this policy. One has to work backward from some figures. Suppose we lay for ourselves a target of, say, 2 million electric vehicles of whatever is easily doable, maybe a car or two-wheelers or buses, then that is a figure that everybody has to follow. In 10 cities, 15 cities, that has to be followed. And come what may, one has to work then and see if this fine is not enough for polluters, make it double, triple, 4 times. If this incentive is not enough, let the others pay, polluters pay, and then let the others take the advantage of that. Unless we reach the tipping point, unless we cross the threshold, unless there is a positive word of mouth on the field of the actual users, this mobility will happen when it happens. It will be 2040 perhaps.
So on electric vehicle, there is an effort that has been initiated by the government, and whether it is removal of any permits for electric vehicles as well as vehicles which run on methanol and ethanol, that is a very recent development. And the fact that whether it is e-rickshaws or e-scooters and all, we are trying to more and more incentivize adoption of electric vehicles. But yes, there is some way to go before we can claim or we can sit back and think that we have been able to really incentivize adoption of electric vehicles. The lady there wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I have a question also, as well as whatever I have seen and experienced I would like to share. I'm very thankful to all of you. We are discussing a very challenging problem of our country, that is mobility and climate change issues. Actually, if we look at the built environment and mobility in an integrated way, in a holistic way, then there could be some solutions. I recently visited Germany, and in fact, we had association with German University. So I found that, as Dr. Vinayak also said, that theoretical modeling, and Simone also said that data, all these things are require research interventions by the government side. In fact, in Germany in 2012, their chancellor inaugurated one of the house, which was a energy plus house, because there was energy generation for running the house, as well as there was extra energy for e-mobility. And it was in the collaboration with the industry. It was a model house, and they had collaborated with the automobile industry, which is very well known in Germany, BMW and all. And they actually made a family live in that house. In fact, 2 families, one after the other, after their kind consent through interview, they lived there, and they lived like a normal life. They went for vacations, everything, and they charged the vehicle from the energy generated from the house. And all those data, TU Berlin and government department, they were sharing with the public also, that this is how e-vehicle can be recharged, because charging is one of the issue, as he has pointed out. Renewable source, if we have, then only it is feasible. So they worked out, and it was a government initiative, and it had been disseminated to the public, and thereafter many of the houses were retrofitted. In fact, they have number of houses retrofitted for Energy Plus. So I think I would, maybe it's my humble submission, because the government is here, you're representing the government. So such research initiative in collaboration with the industry and the academia will actually be eye-opener for the people, because then only mindset, because seeing is believing. People can only see, and then they can actually adopt in their life. Because if we may talk conceptually, it may not be so much in their changing in their mindset. So
thank you for that suggestion. Yes. Can you give a microphone, please? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I arrived a little late, so I arrived halfway through Simone's talk. So perhaps what I'm saying might not be relevant, and Vinayak may have brought it up already. But nobody seems to have touched on, we're talking about integrated mobility, and then somebody talked about Swiggy and delivery boys and that sort of thing. Nobody's talked about stuff like drones, and that will decongest your cities. Government of India needs to perhaps look into something like that. Perhaps a comment from you. Yeah, take for example, transport in the hills. In all our hill states, our roads go on forever. They're in terrible shape. They're forever being rebuilt. Drone transport, in that case, yeah. That's really it. Oh yes, and your thing on how do we tip it. I think really the tipping of e-vehicles is going to be when it becomes sexy. I mean, like Elon Musk has made space travel sexy. He's done great things with his car. I mean, everybody wants that car of his. So if you can make it sexy, I think that's when it's really going to transfer onto the younger kids. I mean, you're saying, who's going to buy my motorcycle? Let me assure you, if your motorcycle can deliver the same torque and power as a 125 or as a 500cc Honda or BMW, you'll make it sexy. You'll find maybe 50 kids will buy it, but the trickle-down effect of, hey, he has, etc., and my new motorcycle, maybe it doesn't do, but there is that reflected glory. You know, so I really think the trick is making it sexy more than anything else.
Yeah, we are talking of two different things here, and I would like to comment on the Indian scene on the sexy part of it, right? There are more than n number of examples in India where India-specific solutions are not in this domain of creating a very high-end product first, making it exorbitantly costly, something like 10 times the normal cost of a motorcycle, and then hoping that in a short run of 5 to 10 years, it will trickle down. All my 25, 30 years of experience working in two-wheelers says that. There is certainly a very different market. It remains there, the other remains here. The belly of the market doesn't take any cues from Harley Davidson, of course not, right? Sure, sure. But sir, just multiply that into 1,500 times, it is Maruti's sale. So India is India. India will remain India. India will remain in that market. Anyways, so that's my personal view, that it is impossible. One of my sister companies trying to do that, Hero, for trying to sell 1.5 lakhs worth of a very sexy looking scooter for the last 2 years, and the deliveries have been 46 till date. Yeah, obviously then people like me and you would have been only buying it, nobody else. That's all. Anyways, no sir, that's my personal view, and it comes out of a very like 30 years of hard grind onto automobiles in here, that these are two very different markets. There's absolutely no transitioning from a Harley Davidson or a sexier or a 10 times costlier product to a normal belly of the market product. They're two independently operating market. They will remain there. Even outside also, zero scooters, zero motorcycles. In Switzerland, there were so many motorcycles and scooters created. They have almost all vanished. That's another one, right, sir?
To respond to the other observation that you made regarding hill roads, and I agree that while connectivity is very important, we've also got to look at the impact it has on the environment. So the ministry has now been focusing, has now very recently started focusing on two alternative ways of connecting remote and mountainous areas, because they have as much a right to be connected to the mainstream, which is through more of tunnels and more of ropeway connectivity. So these are two new frontiers, let us say, that we are trying to explore, which would provide the connectivity, but minimize the impact that the traditional systems of road construction normally have on the environment. And before we close, any last question from the gentleman at the back?
Hello, ma'am. Actually, my question is about social adaptability of mobility systems. Like in India, if we discuss, I have a question that how can we target all types of society in public transport? Because if we see, like take an example of metro, if we discuss about the last metro, in Delhi metro, the hike in metro fares, there was decrease in the ridership of metro. due to a deliberate hike in the metro fare. So how can we target the all types of society members because if we see the low class society of India did not go to metro after a deliberate hike. So how can we target that?
Yes, thank you. That was exactly what I was pointing out to, was being able to evaluate and determine the mobility poor. And like ma'am said, every person has the right to be connected to the mainstream, connected through mobility. And being able to actually facilitate that is what the government has always been trying to do. But being able to identify that mobility poor, so being able to identify sections who have been affected, and then coming up with a targeted solution around them is what you can do. So yes, like even with the Uber, Olas of the world, you are finding, like what happens with Uber and Olas is you'll find them sitting in high density areas. So people who are more in the suburban places who might want to get connected and get that service, it's unlikely to find that you're unlikely to find that service there. So being able to first even figure out what are those spots is the first problem. Second is once you find that out, you can come up with a tailored solution for that around fairness. It's the fairness of transport. Thank you.
One thing I would like to add to what he mentioned, there is a new kind of guidelines that the ministry has come out with for intra-state. So it's not specifically the city, it is intra-state public transport. We all know that the state transport undertakings run their buses, the state transport corporations run their buses, and they have bus stations, but the facilities of the bus stations are only available to the state road transport buses. It's not available to the private buses. So it's like we as a government are discriminating between those who are using government corporation buses, those who are using private buses. So we have tried to change this, bring about a change among the state governments and the way that they approach the issue. We are saying that if a state government offers land which is suitable for a world-class bus port to be developed, then the government of India, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, will take on the entire cost of doing the DPR for that particular bus port, doing the bidding, selecting a private developer. The only consideration and the only condition that we have laid is that even though the land might belong to the State Transport Corporation, the buses, all public transport buses and private transport buses have to be allowed to use this infrastructure so that their passengers are not embarking and disembarking on the road, facing accidents and facing a lack of amenities. These bus ports with proper infrastructure, whether it is toilets or whether it is having some proper water to drink and food to eat, and even having some basic amenities for changing the bus to move to some other transit point. So this infrastructure has to be made available to all bus passengers. This way we are trying to bring about a level playing field between government undertakings and private transporters who are plying their buses. So it is one step in the direction of bringing about some kind of non-discriminatory facilities for all bus passengers, and this in turn we expect would give a fillip to public bus transportation on an intrastate mode. So that is a step in that direction. It's very new, very recent. We are hoping that such facilities would come out in the next 1 year in different parts of the country. So anyway, at the end of this, I would like to thank the audience for being, listening with such care and attention, and for the spirited discussions that have taken place. And I would like to thank the panelists for their interventions and for having given some ideas and suggestions. And we are going to have a meeting now with in the ministry with the University of New South Wales. So hopefully such collaboration will result because of these exchange of ideas. And thank you, Terry, for putting this workshop together. Thank you.
On behalf of GRIHA Council, I wish to thank all the distinguished panel members for such an enriching session. And I now request the esteemed chair to kindly hand over the gift of tokens to the panel members. Professor Vinayak Dixit, please. Ms. Akshima Ghate. Dr. Simone Leao. Dr. Mitra. Mr. Gill. I request Seth sir to please present a small token of appreciation to the esteemed chair. So these paintings showcase Gond art, which comes with the belief that good images bring good luck. Gonds are the major tribal communities in central India, and they have done this painting by using charcoal, colored soil, natural leaves, and plant sap. So this is a mystical art form that was created by putting together the dots and the lines. I request all the panelists to please stay back for a group photograph.